Hi, and welcome to the 2 Minute Warning. I'm your host, Perry Busby. The 2 Minute Warning is brought to you by the Westside Gazette newspaper, one of South Florida's oldest African American owned newspaper. And my co-host tonight is the publisher of the Westside Gazette, Mr. Bobby Henry. Bobby, how you doing, my brother?
Well, man, I really get stressed during this time of the year. I'm hanging. I'm all right, man. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you fine.
Okay. I'm using another apparatus, if you will, this tablet, and I'm having difficulty in hearing. So I just want to make sure I'm coming across.
Okay. No, I hear you fine.
Okay.
And tonight it's a special night as we get ready for, or as we are approaching uh, November 2nd and the primary election for uh, Congressional District 20. Uh, we thought it was important to let the candidates come speak to the community. I know they've been out and about doing stump speeches, uh, but this is an opportunity that we hope will be more comforting and more uh, engaging with the community.
Mm-hmm.
So, Bobby, I'm looking forward to it.
I am too, and I want to give everybody. We want to give everybody an equal opportunity. There was a slip up in the delivery for Bobby for Representative Bobby Dubose tonight. So he'll be joining us, and I'll lay claim to that hiccup. So, but I do want people to know, uh, politics can be very tricky, and we don't want to be accused or have any fingers pointed at us saying that we did certain things to certain individuals. Sometimes we as a people can be the most uh, hurtful people towards each other, and I don't ever want that to be said about our position. So I want to state this um, clearly.
Hmm.
We want to give everybody equal opportunity and fairness, and that's that. So,
Okay. Well,
mhm.
I think we have, uh, and I believe the outcome will show that we have. But as I've gotten um, up to speed on this congressional district, like I say, those of you who have been here and was here in '95 and even predate the late Congressman Alcee Hastings' rise to that seat. Uh, for those of us who are now in this district uh, who join in representing and acknowledging this iconic figure. Uh, but we've been playing some catch up, and one of the things that I found out recently uh, that has been really amazing to me, Bobby, and that was, do you know that uh, District 20 is the most Democratic district in Congress?
Wow. Well,
And not only is it the most Democratic, it is the blackest district in Congress.
okay, Perry, would you repeat that again, please?
It is Congressional District 20 in Florida. It was recently reported that of all the congressional districts in Congress, it is the most Democratic in representation, and its representation is the blackest in Congress. That is how
Wow.
iconic this seat is.
Hmm. So we can't afford to have any hiccups in electing uh, that person to lead us from this district.
Yes.
It's more than a notion. It's more than just I want to be elected.
Mm-hmm.
There's a much more significant role. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Um,
So, and I think we have a field of candidates uh, that offers options.
mm-hmm,
Say what you like about it. It's better to have many options than to have one, and it's even worse to have options and not even know 'em.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
What
so
about
we have
having a
some
whole?
options, and that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm, yeah. What about a whole bunch of options that don't pan out to uh, be worthy, but just a lot of them? I'm just throwing that out there. That's all.
Right, right, yeah.
I'm
No, that is
saying
a
that
pot. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not saying that any one of the 11 vying for this office is of such, but I do want
Mm-hmm.
to make a point that if we have a field of candidates who are not uh, qualified, then we would get back to choosing, as old folks used to say, the least of the most evil. Well, whatever.
The lesser of two evils.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Not saying
And
that's the case, but
yeah, yeah. And it's not that we're dealing with evil, so we can step away from the evil, but it's a terrible thing when you have options
mm-hmm.
that that aren't really the best
Mm-hmm.
for you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I do want to applaud those who have enough spunk and enough
Mm-hmm.
wherewithal to want to represent, us as a people. And so
Right.
let me say that I do want to applaud them. I remember seeing a painting in the office of one of our departed politicians, and E. Pat Larkins, in his office, and it was a picture of this guy running. This crowd was behind him, and the guy's hair was blown back, his coat was flying, and he had a briefcase in one hand, and it looks like a bunch of papers in the other. And the caption read, "Is he leading the crowd, or is the crowd chasing him?" So
That's
anyway,
a good
yeah.
one.
Anyway,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Is,
So,
has Bobby
but
made it?
yes, yeah, we
Okay.
we have a word that our first guest, Representative Bobby Dubose, has made it. But Bobby, before we bring on the representative, as I said, this is a conversation with the community, and you and I talked about it, and we tried to figure out the best way to let the community's voice be heard. And so we reached out, and I'm really excited to have uh, two young men on who I really admire and their work in the community. And I believe theirs is a voice, and they have questions uh, that they heard and realized in the community. So want to welcome. Uh, you want to welcome one, and I welcome the other, Bobby.
Yeah.
First, yeah. I'm going to bring on first guest, who is a young man that I've just really grown to admire his work in the community uh, and his ingenuity in business. Uh, and he's really astute when it comes to the politics. I have a great time talking with him, and want to bring on Mr. Brandon Freeney.
How you doing, Perry? How you doing, Bobby? Thank you.
Hey, very well, Mr. Freeney.
Yeah, yeah, okay. And our second guest is Brandon's partner. I won't say partner in crime, but partner in success.
Oh, I love
Uh, and they have an organization that I support, and I wear their gear. Positivity Pays, and want to bring on his partner, Mr. Ramon Absolute Robinson.
Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.
Very good. Very good.
Good, good.
Mm.
Okay, now Bobby, I'm gonna let you bring on our guest.
Okay. Well, our guest is no stranger to the audience or the community. Mr. Dubose has served in the district for I don't know how many years now, Bobby, but it's been a while as the state representative. He's done some great things in the district. He brought some educational an educational venue, if you will, to discuss the history of some of the things that Black folk had been through. And the one of the things I remember the most is that he did it. One was done at the Elks, and we all remember the Elks Club. And then he moved it from the Elks Club to the Performing Arts, which was a big deal in itself. So, aside from his political aspirations and his political astuteness, Bobby is, how do I say this? Bobby is a quiet fighter. I can say that for the people. So we don't always agree on everything, but he was willing to step up, and I admire that about him. So without any other delay, let's welcome, if you will, State Representative Bobby Bernard Dubose.
Full government name. Full government name.
I got you.
How you doing? How you doing, Representative?
That's how he tells you how close he is to my family. Anybody
Yeah.
that knows my middle name or my nickname,
Yeah.
They got to really know me and the essence of me. So I'll give you that namesake.
All right, very good. Thanks, Bobby. Okay, so let's get into it, man. Bobby, you've been, like I said, you've been in politics for a while. If I could ask you, what is one of the more potent things, if you will, that you have been challenged with, that you think would allow you to progress further in your political life?
I would say probably the biggest challenge that that I've had or that I have or that I deal with is really being able to effectively get things done, not only for my district that I represent, but for my community. When I say my community, I mean the Black community. When I started my political career, as you are aware, I started the city of Fort Lauderdale, and at the time, and things haven't changed much. I was a minority there. I was the only Black on the commission representing District 3, predominantly Black district, and then going to Tallahassee, being in a minority in a very polarizing climate, but through it all, still being able to effectively pass legislation and draw down resources for the district. So it's kind of an ongoing thing. I guess if I had to say one thing, it's not one thing that's finite. It's probably infinite within this process and within this journey, and I don't see it really ending or changing anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Um, I mean, as far as platforms, there is very little that distinguishes the candidate from another. I mean, just in a general sense. Uh, what intangible do you think will set you apart in terms of what you can bring to this office? Um, you know, the law is going to be the law. The intangibles is the person that comes, interprets, and is able to work across the aisle as well as bring necessary resources back. So, um, what intangibles do you think you have that will allow you to step into
So
that role?
Perry, thank you for the question. I think it's an excellent question, especially when we have, as some folks would say, a crowded field and individuals trying to figure out kind of where to place their hat in this arena. And I will say, if we kind of look at some other similar states that have had these races where they lost political giants or folks who have been in Congress a long time, they've had in some cases twice as many as we've had. So I just want to throw that out there. But I think what really sets me apart, you're right. This primary is 11 Democrats, and we typically line up on the issues. Some of us have different routes or avenues at how we go about doing it or how we get there. But I think what really sets me apart is that, I've served as the current Democratic leader in the Florida House of Representatives, right? We're in the minority. So I'm, the minority leader. And the climate that we had to operate in this session is very toxic and very polarizing. It's similar to DC. I tell folks when I got to Tallahassee in 14, the one thing we pride ourselves on was saying we were not like DC, but we're very much like DC. We had to deal with these Jim Crow 2.0 laws and so forth. And being the leader, not only knowing that they had the votes to pass it, but how then are you to be effective? So for me, I had to put us in a posture playing the long game. And what that meant was partner with our allied groups, the unions, the NAACP, because we knew that once they voted on, the governor signed it, then we would take our recourse by going through the courts. So the things that we said and strategically argued was helping us in that fight. And we see some of that play out now in the lower courts, and we're finding some success. But in the midst of that whole polarizing climate and all of that, I was still able to pass some key legislation where I had to work across the aisle, because I tell folks it's good to fight, to scream and speak truth to power, which is important. But at the end of the day, people want you to perform and to do something. So one of the pieces of legislation I passed affects some of our most vulnerable as students with disabilities. And so I passed the Students with Disabilities Act. That's a legacy piece of legislation that I've had for 3 years, and we've been trying to pass for 15 years in the state of Florida. Where I passed it, the governor signed it. And they're working on a similar piece of legislation in DC. Congressman Scott has it. Now, when you think about restraint and seclusion, there's been over 100,000 cases recorded. And of those 100,000 cases, 78% of them are students with disabilities and Black boys. So I'm pretty excited about the success and what I've been able to do to protect those here in the state of Florida, and going to DC and partnering up and making sure that happens for the rest of the students fall in that category. Another piece of legislation that I passed was to create a rare disease advisory council. And this one is very personal to me because I lost my mother to a rare disease, scleroderma. And that's something that disproportionately affects women, especially women of color. Now, the person I had to work with on the other side of the aisle in the Senate, and if those of you who follow may know this name, but Senator Baxley, and they dubbed us as the unlikely pair. But here's where we found some common ground. I explained to you my passion and my position as related to my mother dealing with this, but he had a family member that someone was close to him in regards to a rare disease. Well, we passed that piece of legislation. The governor signed it. It's being established in the state of Florida. My mother will not benefit from this. However, I feel encouraged moving forward that other folks won't have to go through that. My mom was misdiagnosed for 18 years. Now there's a platform that the state supports that brings the medical community together where they can work on these things, and also being a caretaker and a family member, looking for education and so forth. So that piece of legislation is now codified into law. And I'll give you a third one too that I passed on this very toxic session, and it has to do, and I label it as institutional racism. So being an insurance adjuster, there was a sister who came to me in reference to her insurance company, where she offers a course that prepares you to take the state exam to get your state license. What she brought to my attention was that there were a handful of companies that were codified in the state statute if you went to their company and took their course, you were exempt from taking the state exam. Now let's think about this. If you to spend your money to get preparations for a state license, would you go to the company, even though it's black, where you had to prepare and then go sit for an exam you may fail? Or would you go to a company where once you finish the course, the exam was waived? So she brought that to my attention, and I filed that piece of legislation, passed it, the governor signed it, and so now there is a sister, a black female, who has that same advantage. And so those are the things, the little nuances that happen that people don't necessarily think about, but that's that institutional racism. So those three pieces of legislation, I give an example, and I passed some others, similar legislation throughout my time in Tallahassee, but that's where I think that sets me apart, because I've operated in a very similar climate and been able to be productive and pass key legislation that's beneficial not only for my district, but for all of the residents throughout Florida. And so I think that puts me in the best posture to be ready from day one in DC.
Okay. Okay. Well, we have some other guests who represent other parts of the community, who see other parts, and I think the diversity on this panel is great. Brandon or Ramon, no, you guys had some questions.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'll jump right in. How you doing, Rep Dubose?
Hey, how you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing pretty good. It's nice to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you throughout the years, so it's nice to finally get a chance to have a conversation with you. Um, the first thing I want to ask was, do you think that the black community in specific is disengaged or dissuaded or disillusioned with politics at this point? And it's a two-part question, so I'm gonna ask you something after that.
Okay. Um, I mean, we see spikes when it comes to politics. You know, when we had Obama running, Kamala, Gillum, and so there's times of excitement. But I would say overall, the actual engagement, there are a lot of things that happen. You know, what recently happened at the border with our Haitian brothers and sisters that, you know, create some disenchantment and some apathy there. So I guess the overall question, overall response would be yes, but we've seen some moments of engagement, and even actually in the last cycle, more specifically here in Broward, we I think we saw, as far as the black community, the power of our vote and how our vote has matured, and some of the results in some of the offices, the constitutional offices, of seeing for the first time, you know, in Broward, we have, you know, a black supervisor of election, a black state attorney, a black public defender, a black clerk of court, a black sheriff. And so, as much as probably overall, there needs to be a lot more in engagement, even in this current special election, the response is pretty low, and the district being predominantly black. So, kind of mixed bag. We've seen some spikes, but overall, I think that there's a lot of apathy, and there's definitely room for growth as far as engagement.
So what do we think in terms of a solution to a problem that we think possibly exists as it relates to that? Because when you have that disillusion or disenchantment with the process, you don't have a mobilized or organized constituency to, you know, fight or advocate for the things that you need and the numbers you need to be successful. So how do we go about uh, you know, reinvigorating the idea of blacks in politics and us making a difference?
I think, you know, and I look at it from two different lenses. You know, globally, it looks a lot more disheartening than it does here locally, again, because of what just happened in Broward. This last cycle was really inspiring, and that didn't happen but for black folks getting out to vote and understanding the strength of our vote, because when it comes to Democrat primaries in Broward, we have a strong voice and we've exercised that. I see it in a sense that if, as a black person in America right now, with everything that's being put in front of us, George Floyd, what happened at the border, what's going on with anti-protester bill, what's going on with voter suppression, is very reminiscent. And you guys seem to be a little bit younger than me, so I'm gonna put myself in that middle bracket, and then I'm gonna go ahead and top out the wisdom with a Mr. Bobby R. Henry Sr. So we kind of got that layer, but I feel that the all-out attack on all our rights is pushing us, trying to push us back. And so if nothing else captures our attention, we literally are in the fight of our lives, right? And so as much as we're trying to figure out what we need to do to personally engage us, I think the other side is doing that with that, whether or not we move. And what I mean by that is, again, all the legislation that's being passed and how the laws are being applied differently. We have two Americas, and in so many different incidents, it's just being put in our faces. So if that does not wake you up and understand what you need to do, I'm not sure what will. I'm not sure if you, as a black person in America, seeing what happened to George Floyd doesn't wake you up, or if you know your history or being told your history, and someone can show you a picture that may have happened before you were born, and then you see what happened at the border with horses and white men, and how our brothers and sisters were treated. I'm not exactly sure what will book. I don't know if it's me, Bobby Dubose, or Brandon, or whoever saying the right word to inspire you to wake up and to engage, because it is blatant. Before, it was somewhat hidden, but now there's this bold sense of racism that is an all-out attack on our rights.
Yeah.
If, if,
Okay. Now,
if,
I agree with that.
Perry, if I could,
But
one of our
okay.
viewers, and I hope I pronounce her name correctly. I've been known to mess up. Is that Shira Deadman? Did I pronounce that right? If I didn't, I apologize. Her question, her statement is: she says we need black politicians to stop seeming like they are lockstep with the Democratic Party, instead of insisting on speaking up for black values.
I think that rolls right into Mr. Ramon Robinson's wheelhouse. To be completely honest, I don't want to put him on the spot, but I know my
Yeah.
partner quite well.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. But the question I wanted to ask first is similar to what Brandon's getting at. I think, as far as I've seen you at a lot of events, you're always in the community, which is an amazing thing. It's awesome to see that. But what are we doing as far as technology, using technology to reach people? Because there's a lot of people on social media, and a lot of those people on social media don't necessarily watch news or don't follow the candidates, so they don't even know what they're campaigning for a lot of times. And so when those numbers are low, sometimes to me it just seems like politicians at times don't reach out to the younger audience through social media or what have you. There's a few politicians who actually utilize social media. And Brandon and I teach a lot of the youth on how to use social media as a tool as opposed to a toy. And I was just curious, what are some things that you might be doing that's different than others as far as utilizing social media because of COVID? Obviously, we can't do the same type of events we've been doing in the past. And as I said, you're one of those people who is always in the community and always trying to help, always trying to look out for other people. And I've seen that. And so that's why I'm just curious, are you using technology to help you with that?
So yeah, and so the reason why I'm smiling on that is because I'm growing in that space, that's just has not been, my wheelhouse. I think it was used earlier, and I'm learning how to maneuver that. I am on social media this particular election cycle more so than ever before. I have young kids, and they're on it, and so I stayed as much as engaged just to kind of keep what was going on, and my wife is a beast on it, so she's always on me, and I'm learning, and so to your point, I've engaged it a lot more this past session. At the end of each week, I would go on and do like a wrap up, and I would push it out through social media. When we were doing like the debate for the anti-protester bill, I was sending stuff out with the link so that people could watch it live stream. And so I have been way more engaged than I've ever been before as relates to social media, and understanding the importance of it, and understanding how to identify the metrics and when's a good time. And man, I've learned so much, I would say, probably over the past year, but there's still so much room to grow in that space. But I understand the significance and the impact of it. But as much as I've been growing in that, the one thing that has been a reality as well is that not to abandon the traditional ways too, because there's a whole demographic there that kind of still likes the way things are done. So I have been, not just even outside of the campaign, but even as a representative, been working more to engage those social media platforms and use them to engage the community. Because what I'm learning too, it's a little bit more than just say generational. There are a lot of older folks who now just turn and get their information, their media, from their social media, and not necessarily turn on the television and watch the news. So COVID has shifted a lot, and I think has kind of brought that gap closer, and it's less generational, and it's becoming more of a preference. So I hear you on that. I'm working on that. I'm probably not as savvy as some, but I can tell you like this: I'm a heck of a lot better than I was last year this time.
Yeah. Uh, Going back to your statement, and it's one that I hear Democrats in many uh, state houses talk about, and that is, well, we in the minority. I've witnessed Republicans be in the minority and act like a rock in your shoe. In fact, we're dealing with Republicans now stymieing what we say the majority of the people want. What have our elected officials? Well, let me ask it this way: what has caused our elected officials to miss the warning signs of where we are now? Our black elected officials.
What do you mean, Mr. Warning signs of where we are? What do you mean by that? Can you expand a little bit?
Uh, in terms of coalescing our wider, uh, the Democratic Party around agendas that have proven to be uh, to generate and energize the base, but yet when it comes to exercising those, they remove blacks from the equation, and those same things that were promised end up sitting stagnant. So, what are black elected officials doing to even start making a change within the Democratic Party?
Okay, so I'll speak from the state level because that's where I'm at, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the capacity where my leadership is. And then you can kind of guide me, and we can expand, and I'll try and tackle the question from a national level. So I do hear you, and I agree. And the Democratic Party has, and I'll say it from the Florida Democratic Party, and I tell them, all the time when they speak to the Black community, even on a lot of different issues, they can't come in with an overall message. You know, they come in with this broad stroke, and we're not like that as a community. In fact, I always tell a party we're a lot more conservative than they give us credit for. But I will say this: we had an election for the Florida Democratic Party chair, right? And how you do that is you exercise your voice. So when me being the Democratic leader, I have I'm allocated a certain amount of votes. And when I was called and asked about that, I told them plain and simple that I just felt that the party chair should be Black. And they asked me why, and I said, listen, and I was more specific, and I said I felt like the party chair should be a Black woman. And I said because I've seen too many times the party, you know, we will give other people opportunities and we'll accept them with their imperfection and flaws, but we would look for a Black woman to be perfect. And the reason why I said that, because in the last cycle, we have seen in the Democratic Party who has carried the party. It's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's been Black women. And so, as much as when you're dealing with people or your kids or whatever, you know, you typically reward them for good behavior, not bad behavior. And so, as the field started to shape up, there was a Black woman who was running up in out of Gainesville, Cynthia Chestnut. And so I got behind her and I was supporting her. And I mean, she was qualified just like anybody else. But I found it very difficult, especially being in South Florida and being the only person down here who was supporting her. And so how we get there and how we address these issues is that we have to collectively understand that we have to come together and demand. I mean, the base of our party has been the Black vote. We saw it in Georgia, right? We had a Black Baptist preacher and a Jewish white boy run for office in a red state and flip because of the base of the party. And we had Stacey Abrams, and then the chair, who still is the chair, is Congresswoman Nakima Williams. And so, you know, how do we get there is how we recognize and we demand it, but we got to also come together and push forward. And, you know, I'm giving you facts. I'm not calling anybody out, but what was very ironic was that our Florida Black Caucus endorsed the current chair, Manny Diaz, and then the Hispanic Caucus endorsed Cynthia Chestnut. So when we start talking about Black folks in the party and how things are done, you know, it's a broader conversation. Me, in my capacity as leader in the Florida House, you know, I had the opportunity to pick my pro temp, my second in command, and it's a Black female. It's Representative Camille Brown from out of Orlando. And on my leadership team, my policy chair is Representative Fentress Driscoll, who's out of Tampa. And she took the lead as it relates to this anti-protester bill and how we handle those things in our community. We knew the governor was coming with this stuff, and we started working and getting in the proper posture to fight this stuff. And then also on my leadership team is Rep. Fentress Driscoll. Tracy Davis, who led us on the voter suppression bill, and then Ramon Alexander, Rep. Ramon Alexander, who's the incoming leader, and he's out of Jacksonville. So, you know, when we talk about these issues within the party, whenever we have the platform and we have the opportunity to kind of balance the playing field, because we have a lot of talented people, and too often it's about the opportunity not being given. And I think that's the problem we tend to run around with in the party. I hope I address where you're coming from, Perry.
You
if
address.
not, redirect me, man.
Representative Bose, the district is an extremely large district, and it covers different aspects of blackness. You got over in Belglade, you got something. Pompano, you got something. Broward County, you got something. So there's a diverse. There are diverse demographics. What have you done to uh, make yourself aware of the situations in the glades, if you will, with some of the issues that they're having or has been reported, to find out the truth behind it? Um, what have you done? How do you engage in communities uh, that that you would determine needs your attention? For instance, in Pompano, we have the situation with Westview Cemetery. In the Glades, the situation with uh, um, mis, 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 misunderstanding of the cane situation, sugar cane, and the farms. And here in Broward County, with the forensic laboratory, which has been labeled inappropriately as a morgue. So, how do you deal with those situations? How have you begun to address those issues?
So I don't think it was mislabeled as a morgue. I kind of line up with that one in the community. I'm on the community on that one. But I will say, you here's the thing, and I'll get to them specifically, and there are others because you have Rivera Beach that has some issues, and but here's the thing that I've learned, politics or not, when you talk about the Black community, as Black folks, we deal with issues regardless of where we live, right? And so, there are certain things that are just somewhat fundamental to our communities, right? We're overburdened with, things that are not necessarily put in other communities. When we talk about, Superfund sites, you'll find them in communities of color. When you think about, when we talk about environmental justice and we talk about things move forward. Historically, there are so many things that are burdened and put. We are always dealing with things that we do not want. Like someone is always telling us what's best for us. As it relates to those issues, as much as any issue is put in front of you, regardless of community or location, it's up to you as an individual, as a leader, to engage, to learn about that issue. I know more intimately about the forensic lab slash morgue issue because it's right here in my backyard. I'm familiar with the Belglades issue because of being a member of the Black Caucus. We do things and we look at what affects Black people throughout the state. So we've, been engaged with Belglade and been over there because of the campaign and the issue that we've had legislation and so forth. And then within Pompano, learning about that a little bit more recently, as it relates to the issue that's going on because Pompano's close, and when you kind of deal with things too, and when you're elected, you do try and respect whoever's jurisdiction that is kind of that's representing that area. Again, Riviera Beach has some issues. So how I deal with them is how I dealt with issues that were specific to Fort Lauderdale. And as your constituency grow, you address those issues. But again, when we talk about the Black community, there's just some fundamentals that are just regardless of where you live, you can move to another state in the Black community and just find some comfort and some things that you're familiar with. You also find some similarities in those issues. When I attend conferences and I'm talking to state reps in different states, a lot of times, after the conference, we're sitting down and we may be sitting in the lounge. We start having conversations about gentrification and things that are happening. And we're all talking about the same things, the same issues. We're talking about how major highways have just come through our communities and we're still feeling the impact of those things. So as it relates to those issues in the Black community, one, there's fundamentals, and two, when those issues come up in a larger constituency, again, that's how I'm learning them, and I will engage them and represent them just like I've continued to represent them throughout my course of being elected in whatever falls under my district and outside of my district. Because being a state representative, although I am representative for District 94, many things that we've worked on and championed on have been statewide.
Okay. Bobby, let me do this, and I want to apologize because we have Rep Omar Harding ready to come on. Let me do this, and I want to say this publicly. I do disagree with the other issue as it pertains to the forensic situation, and I would like to engage you in that conversation at another time, you and everybody else, because it is anyway. This is not the format for that. But I do want to go on record saying I disagree, and I want to offer you an opportunity to come back so we can discuss that. But we do have Omar. Omar. What do I call
Omari?
Omari. After that. Yeah. So, but I do want to engage you in that, and I want to take my gloves off, and so we can have that conversation. But
it won't be the first time, they say, and it probably won't be the last, bro.
No.
Hey,
and I appreciate
we spar in love. We spar in love.
That's right. And Bobby, and genuinely, I appreciate that. But we do have Omari that we have to bring him on, and if we can get a closing, a closing comment from you, and Ramon and Brandon, don't go anywhere. We're gonna keep you here.
Yeah. But Representative Dubose, I must say a closing remark of 45 seconds.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Bobby.
I know you're a representative. I know.
Yeah.
Hey, listen. First of all, I'll try to do it in 45 seconds. I'll speak fast, but more importantly, I want to thank you all for the opportunity, the platform. Man, it just felt good just looking at the screen and just seeing brothers on here engaging. And but I gotta recognize the time and the place we're in. I'm a congressional candidate for Congressional District 20. Listen, I don't think collectively all of us could replace Congressman Alcee Hastings. He was not only my friend, my mentor, my fraternity brother, he was a modern day hero for me. And listen, we talked about the experience I have and, my just pure love for Congressional District 20. I'm a son of Congressional District 20, and I would just love to ask, all of your listeners and followers for their support. Make sure you get out and vote. Early voting is going on. Election day is November 2nd. And if you have an absentee ballot, do not put it in the mail. It is taken up to 2 weeks for mail to travel for some reason. So let's get out, make sure our voices are heard, make sure you vote. And again, I ask you to vote for Representative Bobby Dubose for your next congressman for Congressional District 20. I appreciate you, brothers. I love you, brothers. I hope that was 45 seconds.
No, that wasn't no 45. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Representative Dubose.
Thank you.
Okay. Our next guest, as we said, is Representative Omari Harding, who is out of the West Palm Beach area. He served as a city councilman before being elected in 2020. And we don't want to delay. He's been sitting in the back waiting patiently. So Representative Harding, welcome to our platform. Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh man, you got a nice mic and everything.
Got a nice setup, but we can't hear you, brother.
Are you good?
Okay, we're gonna give you 1 second. You make us feel good.
Yeah.
We used to say old men in technology.
Yeah, I'm telling you.
Old men in technology mess up.
Perry, we gotta step up our game, man. We gotta step up.
I'm telling you.
We still
Nope.
can't.
Still can't hear you.
Mm,
What we going?
no.
You might have to let that one go.
Nope.
You might just probably try to use your computer audio
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
instead of the mic.
Yeah. Yeah. Um.
What? Well, Brandon and Ramon, Representative Bose. I don't know. Have you guys been following the recent development around the forensic lab, which has been a real hot topic issue?
I actually just started. Well, both Brandon and I just really started looking into that today. But we're in the phase where we try to gather a little bit more information before trying to give an opinion on something.
Right.
I definitely don't. I know personally don't want to misspeak
Yeah.
about what it is that I think of it until I know for sure that I think it.
Right.
It's a good idea to say something about it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Amari.
Okay.
There you.
Yes.
There we
Yeah. There
go.
you go. Yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
Yeah.
I have to use the earbuds. All right.
Great. Great.
Take that mic back. Get your money back.
It was working fine earlier today. I got to figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
But look, I appreciate the discussion that y'all were having earlier, and I appreciate y'all for having me. Looking forward to going deep in conversation and thought with you all this evening.
Omari, let's do this. You have
Yes,
some
sir.
you have some Broward County ties. You want to tell us about that.
Oh yeah. So look, I grew up in Lauderdale Manors. My mom grew up here. My grandmother grew up here. My great grandmother was Miss Ruby Watson, who founded that nursery school across the street from Old Dillard, and what is today Walker Elementary. It was the first licensed black-owned nursery school in the city. And I have born and raised in the 33311. Never lived anywhere other than in South Florida. Went to the University of Miami for college. Got my degree in economics, and I moved up to Palm Beach County really to get out of my mom's house after graduating. Got a job teaching up in Palm Beach County. Moved to a little city called Lake Worth. And interesting little fact about that city is it was founded by two former slaves, Fannie and Sam James, and they actually bought a lot of land in the Lake Worth area. They actually profited off of their land by selling the lots as people started moving down to South Florida, and they are known as the founders of the city of Lake Worth Beach. The city today is a majority minority city. We're talking about 65+% of the residents being people of color. Tremendous black community, Haitian American community, Guatemalan Mayan American community as well. And when I moved there, not a single person of color was sitting on the city commission dais. And it showed, right? I think sometimes, to be totally honest, though, you can have people of color sitting in positions of power, black faces in high places, not doing much on behalf of poor and working class people and people of color. But in this case, you had no people of color on the dais, and they were still not doing things for people of color, right? We actually, in Lake Worth Beach, which is an 8-minute drive away from Mar-a-Lago, urban Palm Beach County, had miles and miles of unpaved roads in our city. And most of them were in the black community on the southwestern part of town. Go figure. We still to this day have a segregation wall standing in the city. We just finished the effort to reclaim the legacy of that wall and the history of that wall down on Wingfield in the southwestern part of the city. But that was the environment that I moved to, and I did not foresee myself after graduating college and moving up there, entering politics. But I saw a need, and I felt that I could provide leadership that would benefit poor and working class people and people of color in the city. And I ran against a 3-term incumbent, won by 18 votes. So when people say your vote doesn't matter, it absolutely does. And I learned a lot. I had to learn a lot really quickly because I was a social studies teacher. I was teaching civics during the day, and then at night getting the real civics lesson. as to how things actually work. And I'll just finish off by saying this. I think that what I learned during my time at the local level was that the perception that a lot of people have about politics and about government as being a struggle between an established and entrenched upper class and a disenfranchised and disempowered underclass, that common perception, I think, does reflect the reality. Now, it's a little complicated, but I think that's the basic issue at hand. In many governing bodies across America, in most governing bodies across America. And so, although I went into office very much a generic Democrat, look, I grew up, we raised Democrat, we vote them, but not really having much of a philosophy as far as what kind of Democrat I wanted to be. I went in there very much a generic and ended up leaving a progressive based on the lessons that I had learned butting my head against the establishment within the city. Mm-hmm. And so that was my local experience. Went to the Florida House of Representatives and experienced one of the most troubling legislative sessions in recent memory. And Representative Hastings passed away, and here we are.
Okay, great. Yeah. You understanding the agricultural aspect of the district. What how should I say this? What have you found out, or are you dealing with as it pertains to the Glades?
That's a very, very good question. So when I moved up to Palm Beach, look, you grew up in Broward. You don't know nothing about no sugar cane. I'm just saying to you straight like that. You don't know anything about a sugar cane. You don't know anything about a pre-harvest burn. Okay. You don't know anything really about the situation out there in the Glades. The only thing I knew about the Glades was that we went up there to fish a few times. As a kid, go up there and catch some bass. Go up there and put your fishing pole. And we used to fish with cane poles standing on, standing on the on the water's edge, right? But I didn't know much about it. And I moved up here. I heard tell of these Glades communities where ash fell from the sky, and how I explain how outlandish that was to me, to me, that was just kind of unthinkable, in the United States of America, richest country in the world, that there's a community in Florida where ash falls from the sky, not infrequently during the harvest burn season. And I when I first heard tell of that, first moving up here, I was like, child, pleased with that. And then I got into the legislature, and someone said, hey, you should really look into the sugarcane burning thing. And I said, okay, that's very interesting. Then someone who I know who works as a journalist did a story on it on WLRN. And I had the opportunity to call him up and talk with him about it at length. And he told me some other places to go and look at it. And it just so happened that there was a bill being put forward, and I can't remember the number, but it was the so-called I'm sorry?
Senate Bill 10, House Bill 10.
Right. And there was a House bill number, it was like 16 something, that was the so-called right to farm bill. And, what I learned was that some residents in the Glades were suing the sugar companies for the health impact that they alleged that they suffered as a result of this practice where they're burning 475,000 acres of sugarcane in these communities that are largely of color for about 4 months out of the year at least. And the harvest season is getting longer because of the weather. So that's when I felt it incumbent on me to really dig down and do research, right? Because I sit on both agriculture committees. I sit on the agriculture appropriations and the agriculture policy committees. And I've never had a nickname before going to the legislature, but we did a fun thing among the freshman legislators. We did, how in the senior year you have most likely to succeed, most likely to this. Well, we did class superlatives for the freshmen. And the class superlative for me, after folks got to know me, was most likely to have read up on that. Because I really believe in going deep and in doing the work required to form a good opinion about the things that you're going to have to vote on. So by the time that bill came to my committee, if you read the Tampa Bay Times article, the lady who interviewed me noted that I had a 3-inch binder on this issue, and that was 100% true. So by the time that bill came to me, it became very clear. The peer-reviewed research is very clear. Brazil has started phasing out sugarcane burning. They started in 2017. In Louisiana, they no longer burn about 2/3 of their sugarcane there. In Vietnam, Thailand, they don't burn their sugarcane there because the peer-reviewed research is so clear that it's harmful to the respiratory and cardiovascular health of the young, children, infants, and the elderly, two most vulnerable groups of society. And so I went into that committee meeting, basically to prove a point about knowing it was going to pass, right? Because the Republicans have the numbers. And also because I'm just going to be honest, you talked about the Democratic Party. Look, there are a lot of Democrats who are bought off by special interests. And, look, venality is not a partisan phenomenon. Okay. And I went into that committee meeting knowing that I was going to lose, but I wanted to make 6 different points about that bill. So I filed 6 different amendments to point out just how terrible that bill was. And I ended that meeting holding up a picture, a screenshot of an architect's website. Song and Associates is the architecture firm. There's a school out in the Glades called, called Rosenwald Elementary. It's an elementary school that abuts directly a sugarcane field, which the school district leases to U.S. Sugar. 2008, they were burning sugarcane in the middle of the school day. Smoke was billowing into the schools. The teachers and the administrators went into a crisis because they couldn't decide whether it was safer to lock the school down and keep the kids there, potentially exposing them to the smoke, or to let them out of school immediately, but potentially expose them to more smoke on the way out of the school. So they redesigned the school, and the architect brags about how they redesigned the school to emphasize the, quote, importance of inside. They redesigned the school so that kids can move around without having to go outside because of the sugarcane burning issue. I'm sorry, that's wrong. That's wrong. And I took a stand against that. Now, here's the thing: we gotta hold 2 potentially seemingly contrasting ideas in our minds at the same time, but I don't think that they're really contrasting. One, the sugar industry should not be allowed to do something that everyone who looks at the science acknowledges harms the people in the area, in particular the most vulnerable people. That's number one. Number two, that is not an attack on anybody's job, because we have to realize that this is not about the health or vitality of the industry itself. It's about whether these multi-billion-dollar corporations make very large profit margins or large profit margins. And so what you have is a situation where billionaires are harming the health of some of the poorest people, not just in the state of Florida, but in the country, because they want to make a few extra dollars. And by the way, these people are people of color largely. Majority of the residents of the Glades are Black. Supermajority are Black or Hispanic. And in Clewiston, where the demographics are different, they don't burn sugarcane there. They harvest it mechanically. When the wind blows toward Wellington, which I'm sure y'all can tell by the name is an affluent white community, okay, just southeast of the Glades, there is a state regulation that says they can't burn sugarcane when the weather fits those conditions. Why? Because the smoke goes into this affluent white community. They figured that out in the 1990s.
Omar, I have to say something. In all honesty, I have to say something. I was just over there in the Glades. I was just over there. Went to witness a controlled burn. Was in Harlem. Was in Clewiston. And met with community people. Now, and they're on. They some of them are listening right now. So I have to say that I seen and witnessed a controlled burn. I stood 20 yards from it. I got no soot. I did not cough. I did not receive any injuries to me. Right. Now, the question that I asked them and the athletes that come from that area, how is it that these athletes have some of the best athletes in the state of Florida, went on to play professional football, come back and send their kids to the schools in the
Mm-hmm.
Glades. So my question to you is, have you talked to
Yes.
and got their side of the story as opposed to the research that had been done and paid for by some entities that perhaps want to develop not let me that want to take the Glades back. The
Right.
Sierra Club, the Everglades Trust Fund. There's a lot here that the people want their side of the story told. And yes, there have been articles written. I'm just saying this, that I would feel awfully bad if Mayor Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
City Manager Camel,
Mm-hmm.
or Mayor Cowles were to call me and say, Bobby, you sat right in there and listened to what Mr. Hardy was saying, and you didn't
Mm-hmm.
tell him about your visit here. So
Right.
I just want to go. I just want to say that the Glazed Lives Matter group and other citizens, would like to have their side of the story told. I would ask that you go
Right.
and meet with them if you haven't already, but I'm sure you met some of them. But
Oh,
if you would
yes.
go and listen to what they have to say, they
Right.
still live next to the cane burning, you know, uh,
Right.
and there's anyway. I, I had to say
Well,
that.
no, look, that's a very good point, and it's something that I struggled with before voting on this bill. I made sure to call the three mayors of the Glades. I spoke with Mayor Wilson. I had a very long conversation with Mayor Kyles of South Bay. I was not able to connect with Mayor Babb of Pahokee. I also had a big Zoom call with the Machinist Union, the workers who work in the sugar mill processing the agricultural product into the more refined product. And I also spoke with, and so, they told me their concerns about calling for green harvesting only and calling for an end to the sugarcane burning, which, by the way, is a separate matter from the bill that that's a separate matter from the bill that came up in committee, right? In addition, look, I continue to have open dialogue. I met with the workers since then. And critically, with respect to the research that I gather, I think it's very important not to use or try to weaponize research that has been put forward by interested parties.
Okay.
That's why I believe, look, for me, it's got to be peer reviewed. Okay. And it can't be funded by some special interest group.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Taylor. Yep.
Yeah, you see it. You see Miss Taylor's
Right.
on.
Right.
Okay.
And so the second point I'll make is that there's a thing called the scientific process. And what it is meant to do is it is meant to give us information that is objective in the sense that it goes beyond our individual and anecdotal experiences and gathers enough data, right, to draw valid conclusions about a particular phenomenon. And you test certain situations in such a way so that you can draw legit conclusions about what you think, about how you think A causes B, right? Because A can happen and B can happen, but it doesn't necessarily mean that A's caused B. And what the scientific method helps us do is figure that out, and to do so in a way that goes beyond our anecdotal experience. And the research that I've read, which is widely published in very serious journals and is very rigorous in terms of its methodology, makes it. And by the way, everywhere this has been studied, whether it's the United States, it was also studied in the Glades. They found that cancer-causing PAHs, polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, were 14 times higher in the Glades during burning season than in other areas in Palm Beach County during the same season, same weather conditions, and so on, right? And when we talk about environmental racism, what we have to realize is that racism works to depress the power of Black people, the economic power, the political power of Black people, the social and cultural power of Black people. And what you have here is a situation of rock and a hard place. The sugar companies create jobs in the glades, right? So nobody wants the sugar companies to go away. I don't want the sugar companies to go away. But at the same time, there's a practice here that as it's currently done is harmful to people. And so the question is, can we change the practice and still preserve the jobs? And the way I think about it is, I think about West Virginia and Kentucky coal miners.
Oh my.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Now, for those who are not in tune with what happens in the glades, let's switch up a little bit, Omar.
Yes, sir.
And, I appreciate the conversation. I truly do. And I know that you're going to go back and sit down and talk with them because Miss Taylor is going to make it her business to get you over there. You know that.
I would love to, as long as she meets me at Dixie Fried Chicken.
Well, see, there's another place now you got to go. But anyway, but let's see, from the young folk, Brandon and Ramon. What is it that you?
Well, you said that you were progressive and that that there are some politicians who were bought by special interest groups. I think we all know that, at least on the call, right? All of us here understand that. Does that mean that you are not taking funds from special interest groups?
Yeah. So to be very clear, I do not take, as far as this congressional race, I do not take corporate PAC money, and I don't take money from, fossil fuel executives, big bankers, yada, yada, so on and so forth. Now, at the state level, I took a check from United States Sugar. Okay. That's how, look, I had a relationship, a friendly relationship with the folks who are, and look, I just believe in doing the right thing. We go up there, we make friends, but that's not why we go up there. Okay, we go up there to do the people's work, and I hope not to lose friends in the process. But at the end of the day, I ended up having to vote against the interests of an organization that contributed quite a lot to my state campaign for state rep, just because I felt that was the right thing to do. Now, in other areas, I think that it's look, if you look at my record in other areas, you'll find that the idea, I hate folks, it's really an issue by issue basis. There was an issue about water storage north of the lake that a lot of environmentalists, including the Sierra Club, were like, oh, don't do this. But I looked at the science, same situation, put my little binder together. I looked at the science, and it was pretty clear that this plan to store water north of the lake was perfectly reasonable. And it would actually help the Glades communities as far as their safety, because we're still working on that dam. We're still working on that dike. So look, I'm an issue by issue guy. I want to study. I want to talk with folks. I want to hear people's perspectives and then do what I think is best for the least of these, and move forward and continue to have open channels of dialogue.
Brendan, did you have a question?
I did. Appreciate you being on, Omari. I appreciate your decision to be so adamant about calling yourself a progressive, because in certain spaces and places, that's not necessarily the wisest thing to do, given how entrenched things can be, even on the Democratic side. So I can appreciate that. But my question to you is this. We're talking about special interests and things of that nature. Do you believe, policy aside, issue aside, that money itself is one of the biggest problems in politics?
Yes, I firmly believe that. I think that we should do what the United Kingdom does and publicly finance elections and limit the time span across which elections can occur. In the United Kingdom, I believe it's like 7 to 12 weeks. Nobody can campaign before 12 weeks out before an election. Okay, you just can't do it. And in addition to that, it's all publicly financed. There's no private money in it. Okay, so everybody has the same number of resources. Whoever wins and whoever loses is based on your skill, as a politician, as a campaigner, and so on and so forth, what kind of campaigning plan you come up with and how well you execute it. But also, much more so than it is in American politics, you win or lose based on how well your views match up with folks in the electorate. But in the American system, you have plenty of good candidates who will never have a shot at office because they just can't raise money, because maybe they didn't go to Harvard and become an attorney and have this close circle of friends, or maybe because they didn't serve in the legislature for 16 years and know all these lobbyists and rich folk. Maybe because they weren't on, the city commission in the big city in the county and knows all these developers and can raise all this transactional money, right? There are a lot of good folks out there who literally, if it was dollar for dollar, they would have a serious shot at upsetting the status quo, but can't, because the status quo and the people who benefit from the status quo lavish those who help them maintain power with the resources that they need to win office. And that's one of the reasons why we get stuck politically at the local level, at the state level, and at the national level. And you're seeing it play out in Congress right now, right? You're seeing the pharmaceutical companies buy off basically a United States senator. This lady, Kirsten Sinema, left the United States in the middle of one of the most important negotiations in her career thus far about the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. She left the United States and went to Europe and raised money in Europe last week from pharmaceutical companies and their PACs in the middle of a negotiation about whether the federal government should be able to negotiate with these same pharmaceutical companies to lower the cost of drugs. That is soft corruption. And it is only able to happen because we allow private money in our elections to begin with.
And can I just ask another question before you go, Ramon? Slightly off topic, but given the introduction of this actual live, Perry mentioned something that I thought was important, that we're the most Democratic district and we're the blackest district. Mm-hmm. So as you have leaned into your stated part of the Democratic Party, not necessarily being a moderate, but being a progressive, in that, do you think it's important now as a progressive and as a black politician in the blackest district to have an agenda that actually caters to black people?
Yes, look, I think black voters are more progressive than folks writing the narratives about American politics, and in particular, the intra-party issues within the Democratic Party. I think we're more progressive than those folks would give us credit for. You look at Alcee Hastings' record, and you go look up his voting scorecard compared to other Democrats. He was one of the most, I believe, the top 10 or 15 most progressive members of Congress. You look at the Green New Deal, right, sponsored by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. If you go print out House Resolution 109, the Green New Deal, and look whose name is the first name on it right after AOC's, it's Mr. Hastings. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a guy who supported Medicare for All, he supported the Green New Deal, supported a number of progressive things. For me, and look, and I think this is what, I didn't start out, again, I started out as a generic Democrat. Okay, I didn't vote for Bernie Sanders, first time or the second time. Okay, I endorsed Joe Biden in the presidency. In the primary here, when it got to Florida, I felt it was time for us to move ahead because we had to unify to get rid of President Orange over there. But I think what a lot of African-American voters can identify with progressives is the willingness to go all the way, right? The willingness to challenge entrenched interests, to upset the status quo, to do whatever is necessary, okay, to deliver the goods for working class people, like Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. That is the progressive ethos as far as the temperament that we bring to governing and to representing people. There's an ideological piece to that I think progressives are working on, convincing that not just our temperament and our willingness to upset the status quo, even if it means challenging people in our own party to get things done for working class people, but as far as the agenda and where that comes from ideologically, I think progressives are working hard to convince black folks that, hey, Medicare for All is something that will benefit us disproportionately as this healthcare crisis affects black folk. A policy like Medicare for All will disproportionately benefit black folk. That work is being done. And one of the things I love about the United States Congress is that you have women and men of color, like an Ayanna Pressley, like a Cori Bush, like a Jamal Bowman, like an AOC, like an Ilhan Omar, who is African, she's Somalian, okay, like a Rashida Tlaib, who is Palestinian. That movement is led by men and women of color who were able to speak my language. Bernie Sanders, I have a respect for him now that I wasn't able to have 4 years ago, because for me, it's not that I disagreed with the things he was saying, but I was like, who is this old white man talking about Medicare for all, right? But AOC and Ayanna Pressley in particular, and now Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman, they were able to put these concepts in languages and in terms, and using also their experiences that really deeply resonated with me. And when you reflect on how they talk about these issues and why it's so important for them to advocate for the things they advocate for as progressives, it made it really clear that a progressive agenda is a pro-Black agenda. It's a pro-brown agenda because it's a pro-poor and working class agenda.
So let me ask you this. So I definitely agree with what you're saying, but one of the things I think a lot of Black people that I've spoke to feel like the Democratic Party has let them down in a lot of ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we see this recently at the border with the way they're treating our Haitian brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
We've tried to pass a anti-lynching bill for over 120 years. It's failed 240 times. These are things that affect Black people immediately, and as you see, we're still being lynched.
Right.
I have not heard a Black politician speak about this in a long time. Where's the anger? Where's the fire with our politicians in getting some of these things done? Because this affects us. They just passed a Asian hate bill, but still nothing for Black people. Like, what is it that we need to do to get something like that done? Something specifically for us.
Yeah, that's a good question. So first of all, I'm angry. Okay, I'm half joking and half serious. When I say that, we need a moratorium on white men on horses. Okay, they say that it wasn't whips in the hand, it was split reins. Look, how about let's just not do the horses thing, and we could eliminate any possibility.
Right.
Okay, that there could be some misunderstandings and confusion with respect to hate crimes. I think it's quite obvious that lynching should be a federal crime, and that we need something very specific to the Black community with respect to hate crime language in federal statutes. And I just really think it's a matter of not being satisfied with the crumbs that they hand us, and and it's also a matter of understanding what it means for something to be unacceptable. Okay. If something is not acceptable, that means you don't accept it. Okay. That means that you use whatever leverage you have to ensure that that's not something that you get. Okay. And in this case, what's unacceptable is a status quo that does not acknowledge the historic nature of anti-Black racism in this country. What's unacceptable is a body of law that does not acknowledge the malleability of whiteness as a concept. Okay, I have this conversation all the time with folks. What whiteness means is whatever Black is not. There's a great book by Nell Painter called The History of White People, and it talks about the multiple times that the concept of whiteness was enlarged in this country, specifically to ensure that there was a large enough class of people who can continue to subjugate Black folk. Italian and Irish and German folk came over here. At first, they wasn't white. Okay. But as folks started to really figure out, okay, it's time to accept them into the fold because there are these Black folk over here that we have to continue to keep down. When we got large waves of Jewish immigration in this country, at first, they weren't white. Okay. And still, depending on who you talk to in the white community, look, white supremacy, a key theme in real hardcore white supremacy is anti-Semitism. Okay. But I think by and large, whiteness has been expanded to include Jewish Americans. And we are potentially watching the third expansion of whiteness right now. If you look at what happened in Miami-Dade County with voting returns among Latino Americans, I think it's very important that us in the Black community continue to do outreach to Latino Americans, because it's important that we continue to build this quilt called the Democratic Party, which should be a pro-worker, pro-poor and working class people party, but it's a quilt. Our patch ain't big enough. That's what Jesse Jackson said in the Keep Hope Alive speech, right? Talking about Black folk, your patch ain't big enough. Workers, your patch ain't big enough. LGBTQ, your patch ain't big enough. We have to come together. And what we're seeing is that we're losing Latino Americans because they're not identifying with the struggle of being people of color. We're potentially watching the third enlargement of whiteness. So we cannot accept that. And that means when we have an opportunity to cause havoc, I'm just be honest, to cause havoc for folk in the United States Congress, we should be willing to inflict that havoc in order to make sure that we get what we want. We see Joe Manchin inflicting havoc.
Correct.
On right, Kirsten Sinema inflicting what they're getting what they want. It should be okay to play hardball for justice, is what I'm saying.
I definitely agree, but we don't see our black politicians doing that.
I would say there's a small group of folk who are willing to do it. Look, I spent the entire night on the Capitol steps in Washington D.C. with Cori Bush that first night when she held the sleep out.
Bush and Jamal Bowman are not in that sentence, Ramon.
Mm-hmm.
Right? No, I understand.
Right.
But overall, so for instance, Manchin, I'm sure most of the country is seeing what he's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? He's connected through social media, through the press, to where we all understand what he's doing, what he's saying, almost 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to our issues, that's just not the case.
Right.
And so
well,
that's what I'm stating is that, we just don't see that. How do we change that though? How do we either support those who are doing the work, or how do we make our voices heard?
Yeah. So the dynamics of the Senate are just different just because there are fewer members, right? And one person with the margins this thin. I mean, we're even Steven 50-50 with Kamala Harris as vice president breaking the tie. So one senator, it becomes a kind of mini president, and the attention and spotlight is on that one senator. Now, look, I have argued that Bernie Sanders' vote in the United States Senate is no less indispensable than Joe Manchin's. And I like to see Bernie use more of his leverage to ensure that we get a deal that works for working class people. But in reality, it's about building a large enough voting block in the House, right, to kind of play that Manchin role, but as a voting block, just because you have more members. But the other thing is, I think look, there are two senators of color who are black right now. So before that, it was three. It was Kamala Harris. It was Tim Scott, who there's a Chappelle Show episode. I won't go there. There's Kamala Harris. There's Tim Scott, and then there's Cory Booker. Okay. And I have much respect for all of them, but I would like to see Cory Booker and now Kamala Harris is not in the Senate. I want to see Cory go further. Okay. To ensure that our needs are met. But there might be an opportunity to elect an Ayanna Pressley to the United States Senate with someone like Ed Markey, who is in his mid to late 70s. He just won a 6-year term. If he doesn't run for re-election, that could be our opportunity to get someone in the United States Senate who has a history of fighting for working class people and understanding the definition of the word unacceptable.
Okay.
And Val Demings, of course, right here. But ideologically, I wouldn't put her in the same. Love Val. We got to get her elected, but I don't see her being willing to wreak havoc the way for justice, the way that an Ayanna or Cory Bush or Jamal Bowman would.
Representative Hardy, in about 7 to 10 years, the majority of this district probably won't know very much or even heard of the late Representative Alcee Hastings. Saying that means that it's evident you are among one of the youngest in this field. Our politics is heavily senior. In terms of where we're going with our politics, do you think it is within our best interest as we talk about elections, not to maintain a status quo? And by that, I mean, now because of this big lie, we are looking at other ways to secure our elections. And a lot of times that means by adding some technology.
Right.
Or
secure,
something that
as they say.
Yeah, some secure. Uh, but I've learned recently that the United States and Canada is one of the last two countries where we vote based on individual as opposed to party
Mhm.
beyond our elected leader.
Right.
Also, we saw in instances where even though there was some glitches in the system, we saw New York attempt a new way to vote,
Ranked choice. Yeah.
ranked choice voting,
Right.
uh, which gives more leverage really to our community. Because
Hmm.
when we look at it and you go to vote and you only have one choice,
Hmm.
you know, you're really voting in a minority even if your candidate wins.
Right.
So as a young up and coming elected official, uh, are you willing to help lead an effort to help us overhaul how we even come to our representation? I know everybody wants to talk about the electoral college, but this runs deeper. This runs into how do we make sure that the collective voices are represented in our leadership?
So now, my freshman superlative was most likely to have read up on that. Okay.
Right.
I think we have to go for look. HR 4, John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act to protect and preserve democracy, necessary. Got to do that. HR 1, the For the People Act, which is largely about ethics, but has some very important language about gerrymandering, which is, by the way, how we got a district like this where every poor and working class person who's of color in 2 counties, each of which is larger than 11 states, ended up in a single congressional district when white folk got 4 around us. Um, HR 1 was meant to address
Facts.
gerrymandering like that, right? We got to pass that, but that's like the floor. That's not the ceiling. And I think you talked about having more choices. You talked about how us in Canada we have an electoral system that's very much based on choosing individuals. In a lot of ways, our elections are popularity contests as opposed to comparing platforms based on policy. That's just a function of the federal system that we have, and the fact that we have winner take all rules pretty much everywhere in our system. And in other countries, in particular in parliamentary systems, they have proportional representation, which allows for there to be more than one party. Because the reason why we have basically gotten down to 2 parties is because there's one winner, right? There's one winner. And just to give you an example, with the Electoral College here in the state of Florida, we award our electors, by the winner take all system, right? So, you can win a presidential election in Florida by as Bush 2 won about 500 votes, and you get all of the state's electors. Okay. As opposed to if you're pretty much splitting it 50-50, half of the state's electors go to right and half of the state's right. They have that in Europe. And so when you have that kind of a backstop against the catastrophe of loss, knowing that you get a few right seats in whatever parliamentary body or what have you, that means that you don't have to tie yourself to this particular party or that particular party. You get a diversity of parties that open up, and you get coalitional governments, which I think is a better way of doing it than what we have here. A lot of people talk about the Electoral College. One way to solve the Electoral College problem is by doing something that you talk about. Most folks 7 years from now, I hope they'll know Alcee Hastings' name, because he was a unique brother. That generation of folks who's in my grandmother's generation, look, they had to be twice as good to get half as much. So when you see a brother like Alcee Hastings become the first black federal judge, like, understand that means that like he is better than like daggone near every white judge you can think of. Okay. And so that whole generation, like when we look at, we can't, it's hard to fathom their accomplishments and how they grew out of the environment. I can't imagine, like, I deal with racism every day, but it's not the kind of racism that they dealt with. You know what I'm saying? And I'm trying to get where he got. And he got there with many more obstacles in his way. But he had an idea, going back to people remembering Alcee Hastings. He had a great idea, which is expanding the House of Representatives. which would not only correct for the malapportionment of the Senate. Every state gets 2 senators. Wyoming has 600,000 people, they get 2. California has 40 million people, they get 2. That's ridiculous. The House was supposed to be proportional, which means that you get the number of representatives that reflect your population relative to others. But in 1920, they conducted the census. There was a huge divide between rural communities and urban communities. Many people moved away from the country into the city. There was a crisis, and the Congress refused to reapportion the House for 9 years. It took them until they passed the 1929 Reapportionment Act, where they said, okay, look, we know that there's going to be continuing migration from the country to the urban areas. We know that this is going to hurt rural areas representation. They overlooked the fact that, look, the House is supposed to be a proportional body. That just is the way that it is. Look, urban communities get less, rural communities get less because there are less people living there. That's how it's supposed to be in the House. But they said, no, what we're going to do is we're going to cap the number of representatives in the House to 435 members. No population growth be damned. And so now we're in a situation where we can't slice the pie into enough slices to make it truly proportional. California has 67 times the representation of, 67 times the population of Wyoming. They should have 67 times the number of representatives in the House as Wyoming. But Wyoming has 1 because they can't have less than 1. And California has, I believe, 52 or 54, right? And so the reason why that is that there aren't enough seats to go around to give California that 67, that 54 through 67th representative. So if you were to add 250 members to the House, which, by the way, the framers, when you read the Federalist 55, they talked about how it was critical. Madison wrote that. He talked about how it was critical for the functioning of democracy for the House to remain proportional, and that the way to do that was to grow the number of representatives every 10 years with the Senate. And we stopped doing that. That would fix not only the issues with Congress and the fear that we have about the Senate being skewed in favor of Republicans, we would have a balance now in the House because states like California would get their fair share of representatives. It would also help fix the Electoral College because the number of electors you have is the number of representatives in the House plus your 2 senators. So,
okay.
we got to move beyond these basic concepts.
I'm sorry, Omari. We can go on and on. Either way it goes, we got to continue this conversation. You've hit on a lot of very interesting things. You've educated us to some stuff that, I didn't know personally, but you've done that, and we need to continue to do that for us as a people. You are known to be a fighter. If there's one thing that perhaps you could have done different, what would that be? And I want to say this: when you answer that question, it's going to be time for us to wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
Our producer and director has 2 little girls that have to go to school in the morning, but that's on us. And so if you could answer that question, and then give us some time to wrap this up at a reasonable time, I would appreciate it. But you have to come back because we got to talk about Josiah Walls and his circumstances and how some of that plays into what's transpiring now in this special election, if you will. So if you could answer that question, if it's something that you have done that you wish you could have not wished, but would have done it differently, what would that have been?
I would have started fighting earlier. I came into, I taught civics. I came in there, my mom was a social studies teacher. I grew up reading all the books. So I came in there with my nice little book knowledge. Thing is, you could go on the city council and offer some amendments to people's stuff. This is a perfectly reasonable amendment. And not realizing that there are people who are not working in good faith with you. Okay. And when you realize that somebody's not working in good faith, that while they're talking a good game, they have ulterior motives, it is okay. As soon as you understand that they're not working in good faith, that they really have no interest in trying to help you advance an agenda for poor and working class folk and people of color, other marginalized people, it's okay to go 100% to do whatever you need to do. You don't have to give folks 3, 4, 5, 6 chances, okay, to slow down progress for working class people. Once it's clear that they're not on board, be friends with them, continue to work with them, continue to try to persuade them. But there are other things that you need to do to accomplish your agenda. So if I could do anything different, okay, I would have went full steam ahead right away at the local level, and I would have learned so much more about how to use outside power, the power of the people, to pressure folks inside of the building to get transformational change done. Because that ultimately, if you're disempowered and you're facing an entrenched establishment, the only thing that can move them is this emotion that we hopefully all feel called shame. That's what I had to do when they were cutting off utilities in Lake Worth and so on. Was to use the power of folks outside of the building to pressure on them to get things done. So I appreciate y'all.
Okay. Any closing comments from you, Perry? Anybody?
No, no.
Okay.
No, not for me.
Representative Hardy, I really appreciate you. As Bobby said, this was my first opportunity to somewhat see you face to face. I've seen you on several national news shows, uh, especially when you stood up in city council prior to what was that in 2018 or
Yeah.
2019. Um, uh, I'm glad you've been able to add substance to what was shown, and really uh, hope to see you succeed in every endeavor, and I know that you will. Um, but we do need strong voices, and if you get to DC, I'm happy, but I'm telling you, we really need some of our strongest voices here locally to help build us up because we can't build this from the top down. It has to start from the bottom up.
Okay. You know, Omari, there's a lot of things I want to say. I really appreciate your spirit and that of being a fighter and not afraid to fight. I don't give a damn what kind of odds that we're up against. We should fight to the finish, you know, and no matter what, I'm not too concerned about partisan politics or whatever. What's right is what's right, and we should fight to the end. So I appreciate that. And again, brother, I hope you know that you find the success that you're looking for, and never, ever lose that fire in your belly to fight. You know that's a God-given uh, instrument that we have to use. So I thank you, and I hope you come back. And I want to end this by saying, in the words of Jackie Robinson, Jackie Robinson said that life is not a spectator sport.
Mm.
If you're going to spend your whole life in the grandstands just watching what goes on, in my opinion, you're just wasting your life. So let's get into it. Ramon, Brandon, thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate you. We want you to come back and engage in some conversation. We got another night. I do know that on Monday we have Commissioner Barbara Sharif um, and Perry Thurston. And so that's Monday. Now I haven't checked the email to see who will be on tomorrow, if any, but we have given everybody an opportunity to. So I just want to say thank you, and please, brothers, uh, let's not fall faint because the road gets a little weary. Let's
Mm-hmm.
do what we got to do. God bless you all, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.